Emergence, the act of rising or coming forth from concealment or obscurity into view or being, a personal awakening to purpose and vitality. When we retract into those seasons of hibernation, the cocoon of life that we sometimes find ourselves in during periods of transformation, it's okay to embrace the retraction and seclusion. It's necessary to grow and transform. But the emergence from that state is inevitable. You can't stay in the safety of the retraction forever. That's not living. That's not why we're here. You eventually need to emerge so you can spread your new wings and fly.
All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you. You won't get to choose how long you're here. You won't know how many sunrises you have left. You don't get to rewind, pause, or skip the hard chapters. All you get is now. This moment, this breath, and most people waste it. Waiting for the perfect timing, for clarity, for permission.
For those of us living a life where our purpose doesn't need permission, capturing fulfillment and meaning in every moment we're alive. This is the Live This Life podcast. I'm your host, Heath. I'm here to inspire you to ask yourself the question every day. Are you living? Are you killing time? Hey everyone, welcome to Live This Life, Season X. I am your host, Heath Cummings, and it is great to be back on my feet, finally on some solid ground with a fresh new start for the show. I'm coming off of having to cut season 5 short, the last season, with everything that was going on in life, everything that I was going through, growing through, that common phrase, the dark night of the soul that I was going through, part like 3 or 4 for me at this point. But some very deep shadow work during that time frame that lasted like a good solid 6 months or more, and climbing back from some serious lows and needing to do some life-altering and essentially life-saving work. And then when all of that was nearly at its completion, although in my opinion it's really not something that we can complete, it's really an ongoing process throughout life. But aside from that, when the bulk of it all was done, it was a super busy off season for the show. A lot of work had to go into it behind the scenes. A whole new vibe, a whole new intro, new logo, new cover, new everything. And in all, a lot of transformation in everything that was going on. But once all that work was done, then what? Where do you go from there? Once you've had the chance to say that you've transformed, you've healed, if you're lucky enough, if that's the process you're going through and you get to that point, where do you go? It's easy to really stay in that place of retraction that we retreat to so that you can heal and you get away from it all. But do you stay in that comfortable cocoon and stay in seclusion forever? Do you stay in that place that you've built for yourself? Or do you get back out there in the world and see if those muscles that you've strengthened through that process can handle the weight of the world that is now out there waiting for you? A majority of the time that I was gone, at least while I was in the midst of the heavy parts of it, it felt like being in a cocoon, really. I could tell there was transformation going on, and it was definitely in a place of seclusion, and really imposed a level of self-isolation throughout the entire thing until I had to figure out everything and was at a place where I felt confident about the transformation I was making. I fell apart this time so massively last year that I had to take a leave from literally everything, as I talked about in the season finale of season 5. I didn't really have much of a choice in the matter. But looking in hindsight, if I were ever in that place of discord again, such a heavy place of discord, I would choose to back out of life much sooner than I did, but I would do it in the same extreme level, because back then I knew something was up. It was beyond the typical life hurdles that we typically go through. This one was big. I could just feel that deep shaking foundational shakeup that was going on in life. It was erupting from the root of my being, and that noise, that rumble, it was calling for 100% of my attention. So I put myself in that complete isolation. And to be honest with you all, I don't think that's something that we as a society give ourselves enough of. We don't have that opportunity enough in life. And as a matter of fact, society tries to really make sure that we're always neck deep in something. There's always something to do and somewhere to go, especially here in the West. It is just a go, go, go type of mentality in our society. It feels like we are constantly expected to be social at all times, at our best behavior, putting out the best foot forward for everybody, no matter what's going on, that toxic positivity thing that I've talked about in previous episodes. And we're not doing something if we're not out there. It's all about being judged by metrics and likes and follows. But really, the true judgment, the true strength of character, the true amount of growth that can be measured is actually in the complete opposite place from all of that. And when we put ourselves there, we actually allow for an amazing process of true growth and fulfillment to take place. And it's only in that cocoon. That cocoon process is essentially the place where power comes back to us. That place of true transformation is where it all happens, is in that place of power. That place in and of itself is essentially a metamorphosis that we see throughout so many different things in the natural world. Insects go through it. We see the change in the seasons with, winter and spring, especially us up here in the north, and the wild swings that we get with that. The moon in its phase is all of it. It's all natural law. And it's something that we as human beings have no escape from as well. We also have to succumb to it at certain points in our life to change and grow and evolve. And even though we see these things from the micro to the macro, we see all these natural layers of transformation that happen, for some reason we're afraid of change. We're afraid of that entire process. We're afraid of going into that dark place because, I don't know, I guess change is scary. It's the unknown. We resist it, and if we don't give into it and surrender, that resistance is almost guaranteed to create massive turmoil. And that's pretty much where I found myself. But why do we do it? Well, again, that comes with a host of theories. That fear of facing what we maybe don't want to try to change, maybe mixed in with a little bit of the anticipation of what the transformation process is going to be like, because we know that it's going to be hard. Because, pretty much anywhere we've been in the past, no matter how dysfunctional, disharmonic, or tumultuous it is, that chaos, I think it becomes familiar. Chaos becomes sort of a companion for a lot of people. And for some crazy reason, we look at that comfortable discord, if you want to call it that, and we find comfort in it. It's known, it's expected, we know how to operate within it. The disharmony of life that we've seen for so many times and sometimes pervades our lives for long periods of time seems like a toxic old friend that we know, and we know we need to discard that old friend to improve our lives, but for some reason we just don't. It makes sense in certain ways when you understand some of the underlying stuff behind it, but in other ways it doesn't. It's almost a sense of insanity, because we often beg and plead for those changes to happen in our lives. It's kind of like fumbling our way through the dark in a room, looking for a light switch to turn things on and light up this whole new way of life for us. And we just can't find that light switch, even though we're holding a flashlight in our hands that's off. And all we have to do is turn it on. And we refuse to do that. But then eventually, at a certain point, the universe runs out of patience for us. And it runs out of the allowable time it's going to give us to try and turn on that flashlight ourselves and find that light switch. So eventually we trip over ourselves, we smash the flashlight, and at that point we have no choice. We have to frantically fumble around in the dark, in a panic, and look for that switch. And we have to look for answers. And when we finally find it, and we're able to turn the lights on, we see an entirely different view of life. One that could have come so much quicker and so much easier if we were just allowing ourselves to look at the tools and the signs and everything that's in front of us for so long, because it happens most of the time for many of us. But instead we do that trip and fall, and we make things difficult for us. Ultimately, either way, when the lights finally come on and our eyes adjust to that new light and the view in front of us, our life is completely different. And at that point, we have to emerge from that dark room into whatever is now going to lie beyond it, and that whole new perspective that we're going to have. And once I feel in my own experience like I had confidently emerged from that dark room, that dark time period, once I had really gained the confidence this time that it actually found my way this time and not just talked about it at a surface level, which is exactly what I caught myself doing at the tail end of the season last season with those last few episodes that I recorded. This time, when I was actually sure and I had thoroughly let my wings dry and took my time and was deliberate about it all, I decided it was time to break out of that cocoon. And I had to see what life was going to be like ultimately. And I had to let myself go through some tests along the way, see if we could actually fly and regain my confidence back. But the breakdown process this time around was very immense, so it took a long time for that emergence to happen. And I also dragged it out quite a bit because I treated it so much differently this time around than any other time in my life. I took the emergence process as something that was very methodical and deliberate and calculated and purposeful because it had to be done right this time, given the amount of difficulty that my life had broken down into. I didn't want to go through it again, and I didn't want to prolong it any longer. So it was very slow and deliberate with it all. And ultimately, that's what we're jumping off in the start of this next season. We're going to call this Season X. Now, of course, not associated at all with the social media platform. I'm not even on there. But Season X just because, I don't know, it just felt appropriate. Something that is likely going to be one of maybe the final season of the show, since we're just going to keep rolling with Season X until I feel the need to change it, and maybe I'll never have the need to change it. But this season will likely take us all the way to the end, whenever that might be. That reality is a stark one. Sometimes at some point this show will end. There will be a final episode. I don't like to say that, but I have to fully embrace it. The end comes for all of us, and everything that has a beginning has an end, which was the name of the final episode of Season 5. But, hey, maybe this show will never actually have a final episode. Maybe someone somewhere continues to carry the torch and does this after I'm gone. I have no idea. I have no control over that. Only source those kind of things. But at any rate, I have no idea what's in store. I just know that we have this moment right here, right now, and we have it steered in the right direction now. I think one of the best times for the first time in the past 6 years that we're doing this. This episode is going to be released on the fall equinox of 2025, which is the 6-year anniversary of the original day that this podcast was released. And I am so grateful for every one of you, whether you're a longtime listener, a new one, you've come across this show years down the road after I even recorded. But thank you all for being here for this ride and being along with this with me as long as you have been. So we're calling this episode Emergence, inspired by so much emergence that I have seen out there in the world, out of myself, out of many of you that I've been in contact with and privileged to be in touch with over the past year alone. The world is really emerging out of these stages of growth into sort of a new era of awakening from what I've seen. And, my own personal story of being in that cocoon itself and emerging from it and finding the calling to finally spread my wings again afterwards is the full embodiment of that whole emergence process. I feel like it's been the theme for so many people in the past few years in so many different ways, especially in the last year. But yeah, the new logo for the show, along with the new cover, all born out of versions that came before it, versions of itself that were slightly different, and they wouldn't exist without those prior versions. This happens with everything in the transformation process. The new versions come from undertones of what once was, but distinctly different than anything that existed before. The new cover of the podcast is one that I actually titled Emergence, since it looks like something that is brewing out of this massive cloud or field of potentiality, like a cloud of energy or possibility, one that you literally have like no idea what's going to come out of it. You just know it looks like it's going to be crazy. And I really felt like that's a metaphor for life. That's why I was gravitated toward this particular cover. But yeah, we go through tumultuous times in life and you have no idea what's going to come out of the other side. But you can bet it's going to be completely different than anything you had planned on. In the version of the podcast cover that preceded this one, we call that one duality. It's the duality of life. You know, half the sky is brightly lit. The other half is a storm coming or going or whatever it's doing. But the person in the middle throughout both of those pieces of duality of whatever could come is standing there with their arms open, embracing it. And both of these covers, I'm going to put in a quick plug. Both of these covers are available on a bunch of different things that I have thrown into the item shop, the merch shop. Yes, it is finally open at livethislife.org. I will shamelessly plug that because after long last, it's finally there. One of the many things I was trying to complete in the off season because I knew once the show got rolling, I was not going to be able to dedicate myself to it fully. But the store is finally open. You can go on there and see that there is a ton of different stuff with those different titles on them. So check out the broad range of all the different stuff we have available. And in the process, any of the things that you buy is going to support one of your favorite podcasts out there, and you'll get some sweet looking swag in the process. You'll find a whole bunch of different things. We got a line of Are You Living? Are You Killing Time? Another that is Get Lost to Find Yourself. And then one of the newest ones that is going to be the biggest theme for this season is Purpose Doesn't Need Permission, which is coincidentally the title of the next episode that's going to precede this one. But you're going to find all of those items in the shop, so check those out, as well as some of the stuff that I put on there for a Cape Cod and Nantucket line, since that is one of my favorite places on earth and it is my future home. And I was very much inspired to do some of that while I was down there this year. Made some things that I was kind of looking for and couldn't find. So I said, screw it, I'm going to make them myself. So go check that out. I'll put all the stuff in the show description for you guys to check it out much more easily. But again, go to the shop on livethislife.org anytime and you can do those things. You place the orders. It goes right through the website. The prices are never going to be as cheap as they are right now. I've got them as introductory as they possibly can get, and there's hardly any profit from any of them at this point. So go check them out. And also, the mailing list is going to feature new items when they do come out, as well as some coupon codes from time to time. So be sure to be on the lookout for that and join that mailing list when you go to livethislife.org. And before we go too far and dive too deep into this episode, I wanted to read a couple of comments and reviews that we got in my time away that came from you, the listeners. As many of you may know, I love the connection and interaction that this show has provided, as well as what social media can provide. I'm not a huge fan of the agendas and the crazies that are out there in the social media stuff. I kind of steer away from it for that reason, but I embrace the rest of it. I embrace the good stuff. I give the attention and intention to the good stuff going forward. That's how I've shed that beast that I had a disdain for social media early on. But either way, I always look out for the comments and reviews. There has been so many since I've been gone, with hardly any interaction and anything being posted on the web and anywhere with YouTube and Spotify and everything. And I've had a lot of great messages from you folks. So I will get to a bunch of them. I'm going to read 2 today, but wherever you want to leave those comments, I am likely to see them. And I really appreciate them all. It really helps keep the wind in my sails to steer the ship forward. So the 2 that I'm going to read today, both are from Spotify. The first one was very sweet. It was on episode 143. Every beginning has an end. And this one came from Holly Holm. And Holly writes to us, "There isn't enough room for all I want to say. While you were gone, your podcast started my path to healing, understanding, and questioning. It taught me that there is no end goal, no singular destination to, quote, be healed, where hurt will never touch me. No person I can turn to who has all the answers. They're all in me. I see your struggle in others in my life. I wish with all my heart that they were as strong as you. Share your message far and wide, for you have the heart of a healer, a life changer." So I've read that numerous times because I have it saved on a screenshot right here to prepare to read for that episode, and it kind of chokes me up every single time. There's a few of these messages that I got that were very unbelievably touching like that. So Holly, I mean, this message, we've never met, and I am honored that the time that I spend to do these podcasts reaches you and the thousands of other people out there in the hundreds of countries now that we're in. But things like this are just an amazing bonus to just doing what I do here with this show. So I very much appreciate that. And you yourself, you are a change maker and a life healer because you're healing your own life. And you wishing that on other people is also going to spread that kind of thing, and sharing things like this podcast and whatever else you might listen to that's similar. Those are all the great things that are eliminating some of the negative stuff in this world and spreading good stuff out there. So keep it up, and pat yourself on the back for listening to content that is going to lift you up instead of the alternative, because the other stuff that's out there is so easy to find now. So good for you. The second one is much shorter, much sweeter, short and sweet, not sweeter, but it is short and sweet. It is also very sweet because it's from one of my very sweet friends, Janine Burgess. And she says, let's go with the hands up. Welcome back, my friend. It is great to be back. And I'm hoping to see you and your wonderful partner, Mr. Ben Carroll. I'm hoping to see you guys at some point in the very near future. It has been way too long. But thank you for leaving that, Janine. Both of those, again, were left on Spotify. So if you want to leave those reviews, Spotify is one of the best places to do it. They are our host platform. Apple Podcasts is the other great place to do that because our reach comes from Apple Podcasts the most of anywhere. We're literally featured on every podcasting platform out there except for, I think, satellite radio. But Audible, Pandora, iHeartRadio. You can leave those reviews and comments. If you leave things on YouTube, I see those as well. So if you put a comment on there, I will see them and I will try to get to every single one of them, and I will read as many as I possibly can on the show. Also, if you're not on any of the social media platforms and you just want to send a good old email, you can write to the show with your questions, your life issues, your episode ideas, or just to say hi and how much you like or maybe dislike the show, either one. But you can send those messages to connect@livethislife.org. This is also the space to write into me and let me know if you'd like to be part of our listener interview series. That's right. We're going to have a new segment coming up where we're going to do some shorter episodes, roughly maybe about 30 minutes, where we talk to you, the listener. And you don't have to have a company or be some kind of an influencer or have a book or something. We just want to hear from you. We want to hear about what the show has done for you, the things that you're looking forward to in your life, any positive perspectives you might have, and just some great positive conversation, and have you, the listener, up here on the stage with me, live on the microphone. Of course, virtually, if people are local, I'd love to have them in studio as well. But either way, looking to hear from some of you folks that would like to be listeners on the show. So write to me, connect. Let's see if we can make it happen. Emergence. It is the process of coming into being, coming into a state of existence, coming to a state of isness, of what life has transformed into after a period of retraction. I mean, we go through that emergence process throughout maybe our whole entire childhood, but us as adults, it often comes from some form of withdrawal from the world, and then we springboard forward into a cycle of something else. And it's all a cycle of spiritual renaissance. And when you can embrace what is and step into whatever it's going to be, and really all that can come out of that process of emergence, you're giving the universe and yourself permission to evolve and unfold. You step into this amazing state of allowing and embrace the change and integrate what the results are going to look like in your life without stepping into that state of resistance that holds us back. Because we know, we've seen what resistance does. It's damaging. Nothing flows. We see what it does in nature. It's like a flowing river that gets dammed up. It becomes stagnant. It's nasty. And eventually that backup and stagnancy is going to affect that body of water. And it can only take so much until it bursts. And that burst is a huge blockage and a huge release of energy that can sometimes be very destructive in the process as well, but it moves the energy forward. And the allowance of the state of change in our life it makes the process so much more meaningful when we allow those things to unfold and we're purposeful with them all. It uses the power of transformation combined with intention and direction rather than you're wasting that energy by fighting the entire process. Instead of having that stagnant water sort of build up, we end up going down river like rapids. They're carrying us through the process of life. And some people find that sometimes scary as well. They try to swim against the current of life and ultimately you're going to tire yourself out. You're going to get beat up along the rocks along the way, and you're guaranteed you'll lose the struggle. You're not going to ever really win that fight, but you can embrace the ride instead. You can try and steer the ship and guide the flow downstream and enjoy the ride along the way. In my experience, it wasn't easy and definitely wasn't all enjoyable, but it was exactly that. It was very intentional and deliberate. And once I had realized that I was thrust on that path again, I became more intentional, deliberate with it. You know, the signposts kept on telling me along the way, you know, I knew that I was on the right path with everything that I was doing. The right people and the right places and the circumstances just kept on rolling in. The synchronicities were insane during that time period. They were almost laughable. I mean, they really were. I journaled them every single day. I text them to myself as they were popping up, and I gave them real recognition. I sat with them at the end of every single day and tried to think of what each one meant at the time. But then, as suddenly and strangely as they would come up in life, they just all of a sudden stopped. And quiet just kind of consumed everything all over again. And then Sylvia, she came home. And life gave me a whole bunch of tests after that time period. And I was able to prove to myself that I'd really done the work this time, and I could feel really solid and maybe begin to start to poke my head back out into the world again. And that, at that moment, was when I first started getting these messages of emergence. The song Emergence by Sleep Token was part of the inspiration for this episode. As I talked about in the return of the show, the season 5 finale, if you haven't checked that out, I will link that in the show notes as well. Go back and listen to that one. But the song Emergence came along at the right time for me. And then, of course, with everything, I try to see that as a divine message, as we all should with pretty much everything in life. There are no coincidences and chances in life. There's only providence and purpose. And when you start seeing the meaning in the seemingly meaningless things in life, when you see the extraordinary and the ordinary type of occurrences that happen, when you see the divine and the mundane, life starts to get so much more interesting, fulfilling, and fun. If you've ever heard of this group, Sleep Token, you'll know that the depth of their music just comes from just like a soul level. Their band is like super duper weird. They're always masked. No one knows who they are. They're mysterious. Nobody really knows their real identities. I think it's out there floating around the world, but I'm choosing not to. I like to embrace the mystique behind them all as well. But Vessel is the lead singer of the band. He breaks down on stage in some of these songs as well, and you can just hear the just gut-wrenching feeling and soul that comes from his songs. It's magic stuff, and it's really what I look for. That's the kind of stuff that I want to consume, and it's important to remember that music is something you consume. Lyrics and the tonality and the vibration, all of it permeates your being at all times. You know, the spoken word can be so illuminating and destructive. You know, that's why they spelling, like that's the reason why some of those things play into each other. And music and lyrics and everything are no different. You know, when the sounds are right and the lyrics are just something that resonates with you, it can be like a whisper from somewhere deep inside of you that you just cannot pinpoint. But at the same time, it screams as loud as a siren. It's so loud sometimes in these songs that it's impossible to ignore. And the words from this particular group's song, this song in particular, it was just huge for me in this time period of spiritual awakening and growth. Emergence, just the word in of itself, is a transformative process to break free from past identities and embracing a new, authentic version of self. Most of us have been there many times in life. I'm sure many of you listeners have been. If you're gravitating towards a podcast like this, you know what I'm talking about. And being on the edge of a conclusion of a process that left me transformed, and the one that often leaves all of us transformed, sometimes through pain and a challenging lesson, but it's in that realization of that transformation that everything we went through was to teach us something monumental. It's in the learning of that lesson, in those first moments that we emerge from what we were into what we are going to be, is where the most powerful transformation comes from. And when we come out from underneath who we were, I'll put that in quotes, come out from underneath who we were, that's when you embrace the new life and a new you. And that song came along when it was time for me to re-emerge out of the long period of withdrawal. And it was just the message I needed at just the right time. Every lyric of that song just spoke to me like a beckoning. It was crazy. The lyrics, come on now, out from underneath who you were. Come on now, it's time to emerge. How can that not beckon you in a situation like I found myself in? It repeats over and over. And at a certain point, I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. Emergence is that moment when you feel it, the ache to shed who you were, to step into who you're now meant to be. The song opens up with this really powerful line. It says, well, you were laid in verse, living on a promised word. I mean, when you look at what that actually means, it's like being flipped upside down and disoriented, not knowing which way is up. And then the quote unquote promised word. It was chasing something you thought was solid, but wasn't. A promised word, something that really wasn't for us in a certain way. It wasn't tangible. It was nothing but really like a filter. It was only something that stayed in there and filled up a void. And it was just there in your awareness because it was an old promise, essentially, and a lot of times without any meaning. And for me, that was last year. This is a part of a story. I'm going to take a drink before I dive into it. So, only 3 or 4 weeks after my wife and I had split up last fall, we had a wedding to go to for a couple of really good friends of ours, just mutual friends. And at that point, we had hardly seen each other after she left. And we'd been totally civil throughout the whole entire process. And when we saw each other that day, we said hi. We chit-chatted a little bit, but when it came to the ceremony, we were both kind of looking worse for wear just walking into the situation. We were kind of painting on the smile with each other, but you could tell we were both kind of broken. Her from having to go from everything she knew in her life for her own emotional safety and peace at that time. And then me navigating what the hell was still happening and why it was happening. So when the ceremony came, we ended up sitting in different areas. She sat in the row directly, literally right behind me. And I sat with a few of our friends right in front of her. And as the ceremony went on and I'm listening to Eric and Rachel share their vows, I sat there realizing that those promises, the same ones that they were making to each other right there in that moment, I had made those years ago. I mean, at this point, it was, I'll say it was like 23 or 24 years ago that I made those promises. No, actually, sorry. It was 20-year anniversary from marriage this year. It was 19 years last year that I had made those official promises. But I didn't hold those promises. And I kind of realized them as the ceremony was going on. I hadn't honored many of them. To love and cherish was really traded in for resent and criticize. It was basically just a promised word and concept. The promised word in action is where the actual results come from. And I sat there just sitting with all of that as it was being spoken. And I was a wreck. And I managed to hold off the tears throughout the entire ceremony and be happy for my friends in the moment. I really focused on that wholeheartedly. But as soon as the ceremony was done, before the reception, I had to jump in my car and take off for a little bit. I had just an epic breakdown because it was just like all of it smashing me at once, making me realize like, man, this is why we're here. The promised word, it was all it was. It was nothing but the promised word. And really our breakdown wasn't for anything like a mismatch of who we were or because it really just didn't work or something. It was far from it. We were actually so similar and such great friends throughout that recovery process. We had more fun just hanging out as friends than we did for, a decade. It was amazing. The problem wasn't really anything except for the fact that we just weren't matching in the way that we showed up for each other. Anybody who knows her sweetness and kindness. And that was always up against a hardness and a heaviness of a person who was extremely unhealed. And that led to the broken promises, the promised word that wasn't actually promised being held to. So, laid in verse, that whole saying, living upside down, is exactly what it felt. So yeah, the realization of it all just sent me. And from there, just a period of introspection started. That cocoon process started for me right there on that day. That wedding and its timing, right after she had left, it was one of the very first times I had seen her since she left. It was very powerful and divinely timed. And it was exactly what I needed at the exact right time, in the exact right manner, to wake up what needed to actually happen with me last year. But it couldn't happen any other way, because it was divinely timed. That is what the divine dance looks like. It's the thing that we are just caught up in the symphony of life. One note leads to the next, and it just turns into something absolutely beautiful. It looks amazing when you step back and look at the picture of the entire process. I actually debated not going to that wedding at all ahead of it. I had this internal struggle where I was weighing out all the pros and cons, and the choice that I could have made of not going would have been a completely different trajectory of life than what actually unfolded in front of us. I made the conscious decision to go. It's what resonated. It wasn't exactly what made sense. It wasn't easiest, but it was the best choice. And fortunately, it woke something up in me deep down inside that shifted every single thing in my life. I started my radical journey, my journey of radical accountability, and all of the period of healing and everything. It was meant to be, and it was my highest outcome. That was the whole start of my new season, my personal season X. It was, at the time, I had been living for everyone else, stuck in a life that didn't fit the promised word. It was a life that I was living that really needed to be shed. The relationships, the ventures, the way that I was moving through life at certain times, all of it was just, I guess, a filler. It was just a promised word, something that was just expected to be day in and day out. No matter how out of resonance I was with it all, it was just supposed to just keep on going on without meaning. So it didn't make any sense, and it didn't resonate with me at all. And it's not really what I wanted out of my own life. I wasn't in resonance with the actions versus what I was saying I was expecting out of my own life. And therefore the results weren't in resonance either. I wasn't putting into my life. I wasn't putting that thing into my experience. And therefore I wasn't getting that out of my experience as well. In that song, it brought up the lyrics. And this one hit really, really hard at that time. It says something about the rose you relinquished again. And that one hit home really hard because we had been there a while ago. When I was in my previous career path, we had a similar breakdown about 15 years ago. And it was different, but similar enough to where it kind of disgusted me, but it was different in so many different ways. And the transformation process out of it was different as well. But that line, it just evoked a level of beauty when you just picture the rose representing part of a relationship, and it just the fragility and the sacrifice of relinquishing that beautiful thing and that relationship that had to be let go in that process of emergence. It was just another one of the punches from that song that just hit hard. It was the core theme of that entire journey. Everything that just kept speaking to me over and over again. I listened. I gave it full on attention and just kept on listening to everything that bubbled up. And every time I listened to the song, I pulled out something more. The core of this song, the main message of the whole thing is a rebirth, a spiritual renaissance. And it's about shedding an old identity and rising from the emotional ashes and the spiritual ashes that are left behind from that process. Music is huge to me. I think that's why this song and all of it came up at that time, at that sequence of events. Music is huge. It's not just the sound behind it all. It's the power and the lyrics and the cookie cutter stuff does not turn me on at all. The bands that are out there today, just none of them have resonated for quite a long time. I've had very few bands that I would call my favorites, but this one, Sleep Token, they're getting huge right now, but they're all over the road. Their sound has got some serious metal stuff going on, and sometimes jazzy songs and R&B. If you listen to some of their older stuff, it sounds completely different. But yeah, one song is like 5 put all into the same one. And that's one of the reasons why I loved Raw for all those years. Some very deep stuff. We're going to have Sahaj, for the lead singer from Raw, back on the show in the very near future. And we're fortunate enough that the intro song is actually one of Raw's. It's probably my favorite one, right next to a song called Sky, but that's Raw. That does the intro, the very new intro for this season X. But their music was just so deep, and that he's a deep guy. His music styles are all over the place. I've listened to a lot of his solo stuff and stuff that he didn't release over the years, and his music is all over the place too, and some really deep lyrics. He's got a great family and sings some really heartfelt, emotional songs and stuff like that. And it's the lyrics behind those songs and how varied their music was that really grabbed me. And then from there, obviously connected to Ben Carroll, used to be their lead guitarist, and followed his sound healing work and his work and the droning of those crystal bowls that he does. Like, when I listen to that, especially in person, I've had the privilege of seeing it a few times in person, just cuts to your core when you let that in. It's just mesmerizing. And when it comes to someone like Ben, he was a lead guitarist for Raw for many years, and I've watched them play actually in the last few years without Ben. And credit to the people who try and step in for him, because I don't know how you even want to put yourself out there to try and cover for a guy with that much talent. But they've done their best. But we always stood right in front of Ben, like way before we actually connected and knew each other. And every time we went to the show, we were planted right in front of him, usually front row, pretty much right there in front of his entire performance. And we were there just immersed in it, and the soul that came out of his performances was amazing. And the same thing gets poured into the work that he does with those sound healings and crystal bowls and stuff. It's just deep and penetrating. So, people can just play a song, but when it's a musical art form and it comes from something deep within, you can feel all of that at a certain level. It's crazy. It's always what has gripped me with music. It's one of the strongest things that I have that influences my life. And it's something that we consume, all of those things that we put into our awareness, we can consume all those things. And those things can do good or bad. They can help heal us. They can help inspire us. They can push us when we have nothing left. They can break us out of the cocoon at certain stages and bring us out of a nosedive of depression. And, it's just that word. I learned a lot about that word during that time as well, because I thought at one point, am I going through a state of depression? I really had never experienced quite such a dark depth that I had during that time period. But I was taught that depression isn't something that is all that bad in and of itself. It can be if it goes too far, for sure. And I'm not giving mental health advice on this, and people have had way worse circumstances than me and been in some serious depths of depression. It doesn't feel good. But the way I had it explained to me by someone who put me through, a great amount of healing during this time period, was that compared to something as simple as a hot bath versus a cold one, the hot bath can feel great. It can become somewhat painful, but it can loosen the muscles and everything else. The cold one, not many people enjoy that process as well, but the cold plunges and the cold baths do something amazing for your body as well. They can release all sorts of dopamine and have all these positive health effects, which is why there's such a craze behind the cold plunges and everything. That depression is a similar state. It can do certain things. It can squeeze certain things out of you, and it can give you a place to rebound from. When you're way down at that depth, there's only one place to go, and it's hopefully further up. I mean, sometimes we haven't reached bottom when we thought we have, just like I was at last year. But that word, depression, deep press, to press down, depress, something that's down, and the depression means to push down or pause. The deep rest, a time of deep rest, and all the healing that comes from that, and the retraction board for the springboard forward. And if you know what physically happens to the caterpillar during its period of deep rest and how that thing transforms into the butterfly, it's crazy amazing. It's a hugely destructive process. There's pilot cells inside of the caterpillar itself, something that's written into its cellular DNA that holds the blueprints of what's going to grow into the adult butterfly's form. It builds things ultimately in that cocoon that were never there. It's basically a dormant greatness that was hidden until the time was right. There's no real set time frame on when that organism is going to go through the process. It's approximate, but you can't say that 6 days, 4 hours, and 32 minutes into its life, boom, it's going to transform into this thing. When the timing is right, those cells are activated, and it dissolves the entire body of that caterpillar into what it's about to become, which must be an awful process for the butterfly if you think about it. Its dark night of the soul, its cocoon, its process must be one that is horrifying. The immune system that the butterfly, that the caterpillar has, is fighting off this process the entire time. It fights those cells that are trying to make change as foreign invaders, like a histamine response, throughout its whole life. But fate ultimately only has one path, and that's forward. And your life is the same exact way. In your own life, you have those immune cells that are trying to actively fight your growth in one way or another. Sometimes it's in the form of self-doubt and defeat, keeping you ultimately trapped in the places where you've always been. Sometimes it's the fear of stepping out and emerging. And sometimes it's really the circumstances. And sometimes it's the people who keep you down because they don't want you to change either. They don't want you to fly. They want you to stay crawling where they are. And that's a difficult one because some of those are self-imposed, like the doubt and self-defeat. And then the other things are sort of exterior circumstances that are trying to keep you down as well. But the environment and the organisms, they all can appear to have a perspective of separateness. That's just an illusion, though. Sometimes we can see throughout our human existence that the experience of human existence appears separate from so many other different things. My experience is different from yours. But that perspective starts to fade at a certain point. The further you zoom out of certain things, the less a thing looks like it did. And it starts to look as a whole different thing, a whole hugely different organism. You know, take, for example, the blood cells that are coursing through your veins right now. They are a thing. They're a tangible thing. You can separate them from your body. It's this round sort of donut-looking thing without the hole in the middle. And it's its own separate thing. The blood cell is a thing. But that doesn't mean it's not you. Doesn't mean that the blood isn't you. You don't call us, the eye, as separate from the blood or your hair or your fingernails. They're all part of you, but they are their own thing individually. You know, just like the bee and the flower, they're separate things as well. They're just separate as even flora and fauna. They are hypothesized as a completely singular organism, though. They are hypothesized to be one thing because the bee cannot exist without the flower and the flower cannot exist without the bee. Alan Watts actually had an amazing quote on this one that inspired me to want to bring this on this episode. Check this out.
The brain is a network of interconnected neurons. And each one of those neurons is a fairly simple affair because it either fires or it doesn't fire. It gives you the message on or off, yes or no. But what we call things, the plants, birds, trees, are far more complicated than a neuron. And there are billions of them. And they are all living together in a network. Just as there is an interdependence of flowers and bees, where there are no flowers, there are no bees, and where there are no bees, there are no flowers. They're really one organism. And so in the same way, everything in nature depends on everything else. So it's interconnected. And so the many, many patterns of interconnections lock it all together into a unity, which is, however, much too complicated for us to think about.
So it's important when we add resistance to our circumstances and our environment and the people that we want to break away from. It's important when we add all those things into the equation of what's going on. We have to look at that as just the process of us. We are a process of that isness, the I am. We wouldn't be on this journey that we're on without those circumstances that lie behind us. Everything had to happen the way that it did for us to become where we are right now, like it or not. But also, there's a point where we need to love everything about us. We need to love who we are and where we've come from. We have to love the resilience of the things that we've gone through. And yes, maybe we've made mistakes. Maybe there's things about us that we don't particularly like, but we need to embrace those as well. When you recognize them, embrace them, the number one thing, you have one or two choices when you see those things you don't like about yourself. You either keep on doing it and you have no one to blame but yourself. Or you shed that part of you and change it, and you commit fully to leaving that behind. And at that point, then what do you have to be ashamed of? You can make mistakes as long as you learn from them and move forward. That's what matters the most. All of it is a process, and we have to embrace it rather than add resistance to it. The events that happen in our lives appear seemingly separate, but when you step back and look at them as an entire process that is going to happen to you regardless of anything, you can't help but look at those things with amazement. You can't have an in-breath without an exhale. You can't have a day without a night. You can't have the experience of soaring with new wings without the darkness of that cocoon, and then the inevitable emergence from it. Growth is almost always uncomfortable. So we do things sometimes subconsciously to stay in that comfortable mediocrity. We have to sometimes kick ourselves in the ass to get us out of where we are, that safe place crawling on our bellies, consuming everything in our path. But the current place that we need to head toward really only has one direction for us, and that's evolution. Your evolution is the end game of this entire game of life. Seeing that process as something grander, I think really gives us a higher value and reverence in our lives. Seeing something for the value of what it's added to our lives rather than something that's been taken away from us only adds to the richness and fulfillment of our individualized experience. As things sort of have fallen away from me and people have fallen away from me, I've seen that, I've really taken a look at that and thought to myself that I wasn't losing something. It was just a shift. It's a falling away so that something else could be picked up in its place. It's tough when certain people leave our lives, people that we've called someone as close to a brother has left our lives at a certain point or something. It's hard to not look at that and be like, wow, I guess I didn't mean as much to them as I thought I did. But you can't really look at it that way, that, everybody's there for that reason, season, lifetime thing that many of us have heard many times. And those things just sometimes fall away so a different version of your life can pick up. They fall out of your awareness because it was just that time. We shed layers of so many different things in our lives, whether it's career ambitions or life goals or people. I mean, the path that I'm on now, everything has completely changed. My goals in the last 20 years have changed significantly, several different leaps and bounds forward. My biggest goal now in life is essentially awakening people to a better existence. And I'm fortunate enough to be in resonance with that enough that I am reaching a global scale of people. It's insane to think about that. I'm reaching some amazing heights and places that I never dreamed of. And I'm hoping we can get back to those after everything is all said and done. But that's ultimately where you can go to when you start to embrace all of these kinds of things. Finding community and uniting people and, taking part of the unity of everything rather than this ever-present division that's going on in this world at every turn. There's just manipulation on every angle. No matter what they can possibly do, they're trying to just manipulate everybody on every level so that you are just divided and fighting each other. And when we can transcend that, it's an amazing thing. The world out there, it's not all love, and that's kind of a hard thing to come to grips with. No matter what perspective you might want to have, it is what it is. There is this opposite polarity of what we might want to see in this world, and we can focus on the great stuff, but there is the negative aspects of it out there. You just have to rise above them. And I experienced that myself, trying to come to a place of peace throughout that time period, trying to release a lot of different things, being on a legit medical, mental leave at that time, physical leave as well. I had some people, some very small-minded and cruel people, called what I was going through quote-unquote bullshit. Said that I wasn't doing my job because I wasn't able to show up the way that they wanted me to. I didn't show up to their liking and their expectations. It sounds unbelievable. It's crazy that people would actually be like that in this world, knowing exactly what I was going through. These particular people knew exactly what I was going through at the time. But rather than get entangled in that and add to the resistance energy, I just let them do what they were going to do. And now, at this point, months later, the universe is working out some consequences much greater than any thing that I could have planned or any sense of revenge, any sort of revenge effort that I was going to put out there. The things that are transforming are just like, wow, okay, I'm glad I stepped back and let the universe do its thing, because it happens the way that it needs to happen. I'll leave it at that. But before I wrap up on that subject, I just want to throw this out there and touch on the subject of stigma and judgment, because this was huge for me as well. And it's something that pops up a lot when we talk about this kind of stuff, when you actually go and get help. It's hard enough to ask for help. It's hard enough. I'm going to just use men as the example, but it's hard for everybody. It's hard for the men out there because they seem vulnerable. And it's hard for a lot of women because they want to seem independent and everything. But it's like, it doesn't matter whether you're a man, you're a woman, you're a dad, a mom, anybody, a boss. All of us go through stuff at certain times, some worse than others, but it's not a competition. It doesn't matter. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to stop. And you've heard me talk about it many times, especially when referencing BetterHelp. They saved my life. I will talk about that in much more depth at a later time. But using BetterHelp throughout this process to manage the things I was going through was unbelievably valuable. And talking about that on a grand scale is something I take pride in, because it does take a lot of strength. The shadow and stigma that you encounter when you talk about these kinds of things, and when you have to come to grips with some kind of demon that's inside of your life and inside of you, whether it's trauma that you've held on to years, or you have an addiction of something, or you have a behavioral pattern that needs to be shed. It doesn't matter what it is. It's such a difficult thing to admit that this is out there and go to somebody saying, hey, I'm out here and I need some help. It's a hard one to grapple with, no matter who you are, no matter what circumstance you find yourself in. But standing on the worldwide stage that I was on, it took a whole other level of strength. And to not be afraid of the judgment and not care what people were going to say about me. I'll let you know, it takes far more strength to say, here I am, here's what I'm going through, I'm not okay right now, and I don't really give a crap what the bullies of this world are going to say or do. And when they come and they try to kick you when you're down, the best revenge you can possibly get on those people is come back bigger and stronger than you were before. Disappoint them by not giving up. It's easy to hide what we're going through sometimes. It's easy to wear a mask. It's easy because sometimes we get used to it, right? You know, it's easy because it's easy on us as the person per se, because we've done it so many times. But it's not easy on what it does to us at a soul level. It's like a death by 1,000 paper cuts. We can't fake those things all the time. And we can't just keep putting on a mask over and over and over again, because we die inside just a little bit more every day when we do that. The task of hiding the turmoil in our minds is fairly easy after you faked it for so long. You fake the smile in the moment over and over again, it becomes kind of mechanical. You get good at it, right? What's hard is digging in deep and saying to someone who can help, that is, I need your help. That right there is taking off the armor and shedding the shell that you wore for so long so that you can actually grow. And it's one of the strongest possible things that you can do. The fear of judgment, or the actual expressed judgment from those who are heartless enough to judge your experience, they don't matter. It reminds me of the famous phrase, and I'm going to look it up here before I had it bookmarked. So it is, those who matter don't mind, and those who mind don't matter. And that phrase is actually often attributed incorrectly to Dr. Seuss, but it was actually Bernard Baruch, who was part of the Roosevelt administration, I think back in the 1940s. Basically, the full saying was this: be who you are and say what you feel, because in the end, those who matter won't mind, and those who mind won't matter. And it's true. If they care about who you are, they won't mind when you go into your retraction. Most of the time, if they are true, genuine, goodly, good people, they will offer a hand and tell you that they are there when you need them. How can we help? And they will check in with you often. Those who mind when you retract, those who criticize you when you go into those places, those who have nothing but bad things to say about you and hope that you fail at those times when you fall down, when you're feeling weak, and they try to kick you while you're down. Let me be very clear about those people. And I'm speaking to them directly because a lot of them are probably checking me out right now that I've returned, and I'm disappointing them with this podcast right now. They don't fucking matter. And those who choose to do that kind of stuff to others, well, karma's coming for him one way or another. But I chose peace during those times, as hard as that was. I chose to rise above those tactics. Source and prayer, those were my new blueprint. Those were the new way I operated, my schema, my blueprint on my operating abilities. We're going to talk about that one in a future episode as well, the schemas. They held me in a place of stability and power during those times. And I rose above all those bad tactics. And I used those skills to fight back. And the vengeance that the universe is going to deliver on them, like I said, is far greater than anything that you or I can dream up. You ever had that happen to you? You ever had someone trying to dim your light? Then if you ever had the fire of vengeance brew from inside you, then you know what I'm talking about. You know how hard it might be to fight that. But don't let them win. Keep your vibe high and make those moves that are going to help you rise above it all. Because sometimes the greatest strength lies in restraint. Great power isn't just being destructive. I've learned that a lot. It's having the power and restraining all of that negativity and transforming it into something else. And when the time is right, it's going to unfold and it's going to work out the way that it was meant to. So why is all this worth it? Why fight? Why get up? Why is emergence worth it? Why come out of that comfortable place? Because it's you. At that point, it's fully you. It's the newest version of coming out of that previous cycle. It's part of a completed evolution. And that enhanced connection to source that you get when it's all over, I'll tell you, it's deeper, more for me now than ever. I feel it myself every single day. You know, it's mostly in the quiet moments, but it's a pulse. Then I can pretty much describe it as one that constantly tells me you're enough. It's one that silenced the voices that used to say otherwise. And that's all I need to hear on a regular basis. It's brought me a lot of peace. And ultimately, that peace is what's going to lead to a highest level of evolution. And I think that's the path that we all ultimately want to be on. Emergence is a process that we go through every single day. It's making it out of a cycle into a new version. And sometimes emerging from one day to the next is just all we've got going for us at the moment. Starting that new day on fresh legs. Each day we put our feet one foot in front of the other and we put our feet to the floor and we start a new cycle right there. We emerge. And fortunately, we get that opportunity every single day. Every day we open our eyes and have that privilege. It's like getting up after being knocked down. It's choosing an uncomfortable world when you get out of that bed over the safe little cocoon that you might have with your blankets and stuff. You got to get up. You got to get moving. It's the embodiment of the calling that was in that song that beckoned at me. Come on now. You know that it's time to emerge. So just know that your time is coming, or maybe it's here right now. But take the steps. Put your oxygen mask on first, and then soar. Your purpose is on the other side of all that awakening. And remember, our purpose, it doesn't need permission. We'll see you next time.